developments overnight, of course, in the managerial hunt for Blackburn Rovers. It does appear that there is one single name in frame for the job. Who am I talking about? Well, I'll tell you all about it next. That's right, folks, back once again with another video today. It's all about an update. The update on Blackburn Rovers managerial hunt. Who am I talking about? Well, I'll tell you in just a second. If you know where you've been, hit the old subscribe button. Of course, your one-stop shop for Blackburn Rovers, new managers, EFL. We've got it all here under one rooski. That's right. Last night, I dropped the video that there was two names in the frame. But since that video dropped, it seems that humongous steps have been made to confirm the name that we believe, or I believe, is going to be next Blackburn Rovers manager. Who is it? Well, I'll tell you in a second. Big shout out to the members, big shout out to the patrons. You know who you are. So get involved in the chat. Let me know your thoughts on the guy who it appears to be in the spotlight. Who am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about Valérien Ismaël. He seems to be the outright favourite for the job, confirmed by this article by our very own Elliot Jackson. That's right, of the Lancashire Telegraph, confirming Ismael is the favourite to get the Rovers gig at this stage. Their expectation is that he'll be appointed in time for the Norwich game, which means that'll be his first game in the helm. And then, of course, second game in the helm will be the trip to face John Eustace at Pride Park, of course. Again, when you say favourite, in line, etc., etc., this is Rovers. Nothing is guaranteed until we, even after we see him hold up the shirt. We got to make sure it's signed and sealed and delivered. Of course, work permits, etc. I think all those are maybe the reasons for the delay. But he has been only out of work less than a season. But let me go through some other bits and pieces about the chap as we look forward to his imminent arrival. Like I said, he is the favourite. The market is still open, and these are the other chaps that are still in the mixer for this job. David Wagner was the alternative option. The odds for him are looking at 5-1. Ika Karanka was the scary name that gave me nightmares last week, 12-1. And Stevie Gerrard all the way down to 14-1. There was a few people on the BRFCS forum were murmuring that he could be in line for the job on the weekend for Monday, but now Rangers have just sacked their manager, and it looks like he's hot favourite to go back to where he had his most successful period in his managerial career. So that's that. But I also want to bring you up to date with this. Of course, it was the poll I dropped last night. David Wagner, Valérien Ismaël. The Rovers opinion base, or the fan base, is split. Pretty much 50-50, but Wagner does have the edge. I think again, I am happy with either. I really am, because they both have championship experience. There are positives, there are negatives for both. I think Valérien Ismaël for the short term can get something, a tune out of this team, but I think for the long term, Wagner might be the better option. Either way, they're both decent managers. It's going to be a selection box, and of course, hopefully we're successful this season with a playoff finish, top 6 finish. But hopefully I'm just concerned for the next season. That's all. I know Ismaël has had experience with a lower tier championship club, getting them into the playoffs after a full season. In fact, it wasn't even a full season. He picked up the reins in October and got them into the playoffs by the end of the season, but unfortunately they fell a little bit short. As for Wagner, of course, he has a more success with a couple of championship clubs and a bit more longevity. So I'm a tiny little bit disappointed about this, that the fact, not this is good. I agree with this. If I am split, if I have to choose, I would rather have had Wagner than Ismaël. But again, Ika Karanka was just last week. So what else have I got on the graphic here? So this is his record. I just want to put that in a bit more clarity. We had a couple of graphics yesterday on Valérien Ismaël, but this is it. As you can see, and I just looked at the Watford reign. In fact, I'll show you a graphic about his Watford reign in just a second. It is not great, but it is a poison chalice, of course. I was going to say it is the Watford. It is Watford. You've got to really, everything has to be perfect. You got a parallel park, like exactly a spot on the nose. You can't have it spill any food. You've got to be absolutely perfect in every way at Watford to maintain not getting sacked. So, him being sacked is not a surprise to anybody. Absolutely anybody. I think right here, right now, I'm actually stunned that Tom Cleverley is still in a job at Watford. But we all know that they've already hired his predecessor in the background there, just to come into whenever they do decide to pull the trigger and say you're fired. So Watford is Watford. Meanwhile, Besiktas is Besiktas. It's a tough old place. West Bromwich Albion, he did win more than he drew or lost there. A 1.45 points per match ratio ain't that shabby. And then Barnsley, of course, the real success story is right there. And again, look at Lasic, look at Barnsley. These two periods of his career were fantastic, knocking on nearly 2 points a game. West Brom, yes, he fell off a little bit, but Besiktas was also pretty good as well. So it's not that bad on the points. But yes, Watford was an absolute shit show. But when was it? When is it not a shit show at Watford? I also dropped a tweet as well about his French speaking. Of course, can speak to Mac Dargay. He's had experience with Colin Woodrow, Callum Britton, and even Emmanuel Dennis at Watford. Going back to that point at Watford, this of course is the tenure of his Watford career. He is not great. Started off meh. Very low down here. Of course, the flags were raised, I would say, around about this point. Managed to drag them up towards mid-table. And again, I think it started to tail off here around about match day number 21-22. Never really recovered. Of course, then he was removed from his position. But anyway, it's just me saying this is one thing. What about an opinion of a Watford fan? Well, I asked the guys at the Do Not Scratch Your Eyes podcast to give me their opinion about Mr. Valérien Ismaël. Of course, it's a bit sweet and savoury, not the most encouraging news, but I just wanted to give you a different opinion other than my own.
Thoughts on Valérien Ismaël are sort of mixed, like a lot of managers or head coaches. There were good points and bad points. I think on the whole, Watford fans won't look back at Ismaël as a particularly well-liked manager. He's quite an imposing and quite a hard character to kind of like or become attached to. The good stuff? We had a toxic dressing room with too many players doing pretty much whatever they wanted, really. And he was the first one to bring in any form of discipline. It took a few examples, though, before reports of, players turning up late for team meetings or training started to kind of dwindle and disappear. His method to do this was to drop a team starter to the bench, and somebody who was already on the bench would be dropping out of the squad completely. This weakened the team and therefore was sort of respected, but also kind of a little bit hard to do. Once they were out, they had to earn their way back in. His man management was apparently good, but with a caveat to come a little later. His training sessions under him were certainly considered by those at the club as being of a high quality. They were really impressed with this guy, and they really had stated at the start of the season that they wanted to try to, kind of stick with him, which, anybody knowing Watford, that's a fairly big statement to live up to. Our first game sort of carried him through his first batches of games, really. We were 4-0 up against QPR after 45 minutes. But after the first 10 games, we'd won 2, we'd drawn 3 and we'd lost 5. For some inexplicable reason, the club extended his contract with us in 21st place. But from then on until Boxing Day, we went on a really good run and were back up against the playoffs, kind of over Christmas. On Boxing Day, after a 4-1 surprise home defeat against Bristol City, where frankly they could have got 9, we were simply abject and ended up again winning only twice in the next 13 games, and then he was let go. The club tried to support him, but the writing was on the wall. In this period, the bad stuff became apparent. Admired by the club for his man management and getting hold of the dressing room, it became known that he was capable of really falling out with a player or 2 or 3 or 4. Players of long standing at the club were dropped. Others were put out on loan or simply just not considered until he went. A report of bullying of a young player surfaced and were never really kind of confirmed or denied by the club. His tactical inflexibility, of which West Brom fans had kind of warned us, was apparent. But whereas we had been hoping for a direct style manager, he'd seemingly tried to reinvent himself and was not for turning in any way, shape or form. The result was in many ways with one or no shots on target from the team. And, we were watching a team with no coherent plan on display. And that phrase of what have they been doing in training all week was often heard. At the end of the transfer window in January, he was reportedly offered a couple of decent players for Championship standards, certainly. Allegedly, he didn't want them if they weren't the players that he had stated he wanted. And sticking to your guns is one thing, but in the Championship, and especially at Watford these days, you have to accept that you are there to coach the players that you are given and to basically get on with it. When he was finally let go in March, we were all thrilled, to be quite frank, as he'd outstayed his welcome by pretty much at least a month.
So once again, I appreciate the guys over the Do Not Scratch Your Eyes Watford podcast for their opinion on Valérien Ismaël. Yeah, of course, if you asked the Barnsley guy, they would absolutely, wax lyrical about the geezer. West Brom, I did reach out to a couple of guys on him, but again, still waiting to hear that. But again, we're not confirmed, we're not signed, sealed, delivered just yet, but the indication is that he will become the new Blackburn Rovers manager within the next 24 to 48 hours. So stand by for that. Of course, what are your thoughts and opinions on Valérien Ismaël, the impending arrival of the new Messiah, taking over the reins from John Eustace? Can he get us over the line? Big couple of first games on his agenda with Norwich this weekend, at Ewood, and then, of course, the big one, the derby against Derby, the John Eustace derby. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. I look forward to seeing you and, of course, confirming the news with you. But until then, I'm done.